Carol, welcome. And yeah, we open the floor up to you. We're so grateful for you being here with us today.
Wado Corey, Osio Nicadawo, Ukahati Siquanio Hata Wado, Galie Liga, Jigedo Akohiga. Ahan Jigedo, Nuch, Jestas Ale, Hino Neno, Aniawia Junena sa. Hia Gadohi Una Jale, Gay Doa. Longmont, Colorado, do Doa Galisigat. Ahani Aktayahaski, Aleogineji, Age Huja, O Jeha. Kosanale, Igiali Haley Jeha, Skieta Dasti Heno. Anichalagi, Ijan Kosanale. Ogena sa winasti, I would do Liska. Aseno, Tlawa, we dasti. We Jedo, Igiali Haley Jeha. Nigada go Husti, Dida ni. Here, I will hear you. Hello, everyone. Good morning. That was my humble attempt to introduce myself in my language, to thank you for inviting me to speak today, and to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho homelands, where I live here in Longmont, Colorado. I greet all my Cherokee relatives, as well as my friends and colleagues who are there in the homelands, and those who are watching from their home. It breaks my heart not to be there in person. I very much wanted to visit our homelands again, to see old friends and to meet new ones. So I just want to thank the organizers of this event, the working group, and then a special shout out to my friend and colleague, Dr. Trey Adcock, for inviting me and coordinating with me over email and text and whatnot, as things are rapidly and constantly changing as far as my original plans to be there in person. So thanks to everyone for having me. I just want to present a little bit about my work. I'm really grateful that you're all reading my book and articles. And so I hope that this is able to spark a conversation, really give maybe a little more context, background to what I do. And so with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Give me a second to get set up here. All right, thumbs up if that looks good on your end. All right, thank you. So this, just to mention the photographs here, many of you may know this plant. This is American ginseng. Odalgat, so mountain, it climbs the mountain. And this is, I think, a picture of a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, 3 to 5-year-old root. And the aerial parts, they're growing in Oklahoma. And story behind that is back in 2008. I used to work for the Cherokee Nation Natural Resources Department, and I was also a graduate student at the time. So I had a kind of a internship, if you will, working with the folks in that department. And we were seeking to reestablish this plant. And when I say reestablish, it's kind of a contentious term, because your formal botanists will disagree that ginseng ever grew in this part of the Ozark Mountains, but Cherokee people used to gather it. And so a lot of elders we were interviewing were saying they couldn't find it anymore in the places they once would go to find it. And so we decided to do some work toward reestablishing it. I wish I could say this was wildly successful, but given the state of the climate and also the difficulty, the very sensitive plant that ginseng is, and very picky in terms of where it can grow, we haven't been able to continue this, and these plants I don't think have made it past this time. One interesting thing about it is it grows symbiotically with golden seal, Yugita, which is another highly valued sacred plant. Both of those plants are considered part of the 7 sacred plants that our elder Crosland Smith has talked about And he actually features in his new book, which I hope to talk about at some point today. So this is just by way of setting up my talk today, offering some political and historical context for my work. And I like to think with this quote from my colleague Kyle White. He's a Potawatomi scholar, and he says, "The environmental impacts of settler colonialism mean that quite a few indigenous peoples in North America are no longer able to relate locally to many of the plants and animals that are significant to them. In the Anthropocene, then, some indigenous peoples already inhabit what our ancestors would have likely characterized as a dystopian future. So we consider the future from what we believe is already a dystopia." And I would just say this coincides really well with what I was describing in the previous slide with regard to our inability to relate locally to ginseng, being one of our 7 sacred plants, and yet being highly restricted in terms of our access to it. But it doesn't end there. The story doesn't end there. And I'll get to some of the methods and projects that we're doing to revitalize and adapt, as the title of this talk indicates. But I also think with this slide too, from Uchee-Muskogee Creek scholar Dan Wildcat, who writes, "I get angry when I think about global warming. I get angry because I know the history of involuntary removals and relocations indigenous peoples throughout the United States and around the world have endured. So when I began hearing the reports of indigenous displacement as a result of climate change, I got angry. I thought, here we go again, another removal of indigenous peoples." And so in the slides that will follow, I'll touch on the 4 removals that he describes in relation to Cherokee people and what this means for our efforts to revitalize our ecological knowledge and practices today on our reservation lands in what some refer to as northeastern Oklahoma. So of course, the first removal was displacement, was forced removal from our homelands, from where you all are at today, and to current northeastern Oklahoma. But I will be referring to this as the Cherokee Nation or the Cherokee Reservation, knowing that there is the Eastern Band Qualla boundary, but referring to the McGirt decision that reaffirmed those treaties, and also reaffirmed that our what we used to have to call the Tribal Jurisdictional Service Area, I'll just be calling it the Cherokee Nation Reservation. But some of the points here indicated previously are the vast differences in landscape and ecoregions represented in the Cherokee Nation Reservation, and between that and the Appalachian Mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains in mostly western North Carolina, northern Georgia, eastern Tennessee. And so thinking about this, it's also important to highlight the similarities. So what we maintained as well as what we lost. This should be a familiar landscape to you all, but I'm drawing here from Alfie Vick's work, comparing these 2 landscapes, contrasting, comparing. He writes, "The Southern Appalachian Mountains are considered one of the most botanically diverse temperate regions, ecoregions in the world. These mountains were formed roughly 425 million years ago and have remained relatively stable over the last 200 million years, allowing for the evolution of tremendous biodiversity, including over 130 species of trees, 1,500 species of flowering plants, and over 4,000 species of other plants." And so looking at this landscape here, really the westernmost extent of the Ozark Mountains in Oklahoma, Cherokee Nation, and kind of represented here on a topographical map of the state of Oklahoma. It's important to note that most of our Cherokee communities And Cherokee people are everywhere, not only on the reservation, but throughout the state and obviously throughout the country and globe. But this is where our people, our communities resettled after the Trail of Tears, and even before that with the old settlers. And this orange oval here, dotted oval, represents that westernmost extent of the Ozark Mountains. And so I talk about this in my book, and others have written about it as well. But seeing this place as not the homeland, not the homelands, but a familiar geography, a familiar topography. But in addition to the rolling hills, we also maintained a lot of our plants as far as what we knew, what we were able to relate to. And beyond that, we were able to learn about this new place our ancestors were. And that's what we're working with today with cultural revitalization efforts. So I'll read this quote from Alfie Vick as well. And he writes, of the 739 plants that are documented to have been used by the Cherokee Indians prior to removal, 230 of them are not native to Oklahoma. That is 31.1% of the plant species that were utilized for medicine, food, fiber, dye, and other uses were not found growing naturally in the new landscape that awaited Cherokees at the terminus of the Trail of Tears. And so Vic, I think, rightly highlights what was lost. But my work has been concentrated mostly on what we have maintained and also what we can continue to revitalize and hold on to in terms of our knowledge of the land and the plants and animals and other beings that reside there. But we talk about the second removal, so in Wildcat's terminology or framework here. And we have to grapple with the fact that of this area, the reservation boundary, we've lost a significant amount of lands within it. We don't have jurisdiction, we don't have control over all the lands that we once did. So that's, of course, due to the allotment policy. We went from 4.42 million acres to about 100,000 acres in terms of what is tribally controlled or tribal trust lands. And that represents 98% land loss. We also can put this in the context of the coinciding assimilation policy during that time, the boarding school system, Oklahoma statehood in 1907. And the subsequent criminalization of indigenous religions throughout the 20th century, so late 19th, early 20th century. So, another removal here, we could talk about the removal of lands out from underneath our feet. We could talk about the removal of children from their homes to be sent to boarding schools. And this is the removal that Wildcat writes about in terms of the second and third. I would also add the urban relocation programs of the 1950s, if anybody is familiar with those. And most significantly in terms of our political leadership, the story of Wilma Mankiller, who was a product of that, who grew up mostly in San Francisco in the Bay Area, but came back and was our first elected contemporary female principal chief. And that has a lot of implications, of course, that we could get into later that I write about in the book in terms of how our leadership is not representative of many of our traditional and ancestral ways of understanding governance and decision-making in terms of being a matrilineal society. So my overarching narrative here, though, and I want to emphasize that is that despite all this loss, Cherokee people didn't stop using plant medicine. Our relationality to the land persisted. And I spoke yesterday at the Rooted in the Mountains conference about what I'm calling relational continuity to help describe this. We innovated and adapted then, so transporting seeds, learning about the new lands through observation and also divination, so through contact with animals, plants, establishing a relationship to them, but also through understanding the land spiritually, through connection to the Creator and to the spirits that reside there. And we're still innovating and adapting today. So we think about these as new forms of Cherokee adaptation. And one thing that we're working on with the Medicine Keepers and through other programs that we've been doing since the book came out is, and before the book too, of course, but we're revitalizing traditional knowledge. We're planning responses to decreased access to cultural use plants on our existing tribal lands, and this includes securing gathering rights to the east. A notable project that may have time to get into today is the agreement that Cherokee Nation has established with Buffalo National River in Arkansas to gather plants within the park boundaries. Establishing tribal conservation areas and greenhouses. I spoke yesterday about our work to establish a tribal conservation area in eastern Adair County, and I'll talk a little bit about that more today. And also diversifying our food system and medicines. So, and this is more of a forward-thinking kind of hopeful point. Having knowledge exchanges with other Indigenous nations. What we see happening as a result of climate change is a lot of our plants are moving, or at least the land on which they grow is not habitable to their continued health. And so if we consider this, 20, 50 years into the future, what does that look like? And so that's why we're focusing our efforts on, okay, what are areas that we can focus on? What are areas that we can go to that will still have a buffer? Because as I highlighted in one of the previous slides, these plants are growing at the edge of an ecoregion, and it's being impacted by higher annual temperatures and lower rainfall. And so thinking about that in the long term is one of our challenges that we have. And so the Cherokee Nation Medicine Keepers, who I've worked with officially since 2008, but really a lot of the folks who are in this group I've been working with since since 2004, since I started my work as an intern through the tribe. And they're fluent speaking Cherokee elders who function as an advisory council to the Cherokee Nation Secretary of Natural Resources on ethnobiological issues. And their mission is to perpetuate Cherokee knowledge of wild plants and to preserve the health of Cherokee lands for the benefit of present and future generations. Here's an image of some of the members of the group who were able to attend the banquet that evening, and they're receiving a Community Leadership Award during the Cherokee National Holiday in 2017. I write in my book a lot about Crosland, who is a spiritual leader and really affected I would say the success of the group to get off the ground in his endorsement and support for these efforts. He's a spiritual leader, but also a highly renowned practicing medicine person. And then others, Anna Sixkiller, Nancy Radcliffe, her daughter, was an employee for the Secretary of Natural Resources Office. Our dear beloved Bonnie Kirk Jigesa, who passed away a couple of years ago, and we miss her dearly. And Donnie Saloli, Donnie Squirrel, Ed Fields here behind Nancy. Feathersmith is behind Bonnie. I think that's Ryan Mackey here. Oh gosh, his Cherokee name. Wade Galiske. Kevin Doherty, Pat Gwynn is the Senior Director of Environmental Resources. I've been working with for quite some time. And then John Ross here behind the Principal Chief at that time, Bill John Baker. So I won't stick too long on this slide here, but I just want to say, Wadon, thank you for reading my book, but also all the funds that went to buying those books, your books, any of the royalties that I see go directly back to the Medicine Keepers through our Cherokee Nation's Ethnobiology Fund. So, so you're contributing to their work. So Wadon for that. Spend a little bit of time talking about where I'm at next and where we've gone since the work that we've done that is described in the book and subsequent articles My current research continues this relationship and our group activities with the Medicine Keepers. We're supported by an NSF Early Career Faculty Award, or a career award. It's called Knowing the Land, Resource Access, Conservation, and Cherokee Land-Based Education in Oklahoma. It's a 5-year project. It began in 2017. Of course, the pandemic has upended things, has paused in a significant way our activities, and it's also heartbreaking because, as I mentioned, we're losing some of our elders, and I don't want to have to wait, but we have to for their safety. So it's just this very tough period in which we want to protect our elders. But also the work we see as urgent is very difficult to do that at the same time. It's an integrated community-based research and education project, and I'll stress that these career awards emphasize equal parts research and education. And the research component is something that I won't be going into as much today because when the pandemic hit, we were just getting rolling. I mean, we've been working with 3 different communities, Kenwood to the north, Greasy to the more central area, and Marble City to the south. And the process of establishing good relationships with people in those communities takes time. And we were just getting rolling. We had just finished some of our surveys, which was after just going and introducing ourselves and asking what they thought about our intentions, what they thought about our project, and really learning from them. And so we had just started our surveys, which is a very brief 10-minute survey. And I've got a slide on some of that preliminary data, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to do any in-depth interviewing and land-based activities yet. So our methods include Indigenous land education, curriculum development, surveys, interviews, and then the idea for the last part of the grant project would be participatory mapping with each of these communities. And the broad goals are to understand how Cherokee people are navigating and responding to ongoing social and environmental challenges, how Cherokee people see this influencing their overall health, and how Cherokee responses might inform comprehensive strategies for climate change adaptation, tribal land conservation, and cultural revitalization. So a big part of this is understanding how Cherokee people are navigating fractionated landscapes. So landscapes that have been fragmented by allotments, so private property lines, landlocked pieces of tribal land due to private property, as well as the impacts of climate change that they're observing. So here is some just very preliminary representation. It's a code cloud of some of our surveys that we conducted before the pandemic hit, just to kind of show you some of the points that came up over and again. And of course, with code clouds, the larger the text, the more prominent in the data that we gathered. And so you see private property, restricted access, overgrowth, stewardship issues, which is related to the inability to burn the landscape, and then many others. So land use conflicts, physical challenges. So folks who are in a position to where getting out on the land is difficult. And so that to me speaks a lot about how do we get our youth back out on the land to help gather plants for those who may not be able to on their own. So to focus more on the educational program, we called it, we've titled it the Cherokee Environmental Leadership Program. And the process for establishing this work was also time intensive because the elders and I really wanted to spend some concerted time thinking about what it means to develop an educational program that is Cherokee focused. And so a lot of things came up in the process, including the trauma that elders had experienced as a result of boarding schools and not wanting to reproduce that, not wanting to replicate that. So it's a 3-year pilot program. It began in summer of 2018.
Of course, it's been stalled, so we're still going. The students are still committed, but we've had to pause our activities significantly. It's built upon the past and ongoing relationships with the Cherokee Medicine Keepers, partnered with Cherokee Nation Secretary of Natural Resources Office, and additional funding we've received from the Indian Land Tenure Foundation. And so what this is of course, it's land-based education centering Cherokee knowledge and language. And we're working with Dr. Barbara Duncan and John Standing Deer's method, Your Grandmother's Cherokee, to help our students learn the language, all of us learn it together. We've been meeting remote. We were fluent in Zoom before Zoom became worldwide, a worldwide phenomenon. Because that's how we met, because I live here, of course, in Colorado, and we have bi-weekly meetings to study the language, to read pieces by other Indigenous scholars over the globe, including by Jeff Corntassel. So we're drawing from other Cherokees, but also other Indigenous thinkers on, how to make sense of what we're doing and how to put it in conversation with the wider efforts going on. So it addresses both Western and Indigenous approaches to science and knowledge about the land, includes relevant policy management issues that pertain to our land and territory. It also includes community-based research experience. So when I say we, the students and I, so the elders, the medicine keepers are an advisory board for the entire project, but the students and I go out together as a research team and work with these communities. And it's just been an amazing process because, of course, they're all there. They all live in Oklahoma or close by. We have one student who's in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And they can help maintain these relationships in ways that I can't because of my day job and my family commitments. But it's been a really enlightening process to have a team of research assistants who are, we're all learning together, we're all working together and teaching each other. It's really an amazing opportunity. The overall goal of this is to build a cohort of tribal environmental leaders who can take on the issues, the multifaceted issues we face using these approaches. So I'm going to have to speed through some of this. I'm getting toward the end. I want to allow some time for Q&A and discussion. But this is an example of one of the curriculum development workshop meetings. And you'll notice it's not under fluorescent lights in a boardroom, but it's outside, it's seated around a fire. And we spent 2 full days in, I think it was fall of 2017, talking about this. And here pictured are Bonnie Kirk Jigesa on the right. Jigesa is a Cherokee way of acknowledging that somebody has passed over. And Phyllis Edwards in the center. And we're meeting here about, what does it look like to develop a Cherokee-centric curriculum? And it's a really amazing process, and to kind of synthesize all their thoughts and put that together for the students who joined us the following summer in summer of 2018. Yeah. So here's some of the guiding principles that they came up with. There's 4 total guiding principles for the work that we do. The first one is building a strong relationship to the land. So Nigada, Gust, Dida, we are all related. And that encompasses plants, animals, other beings, the land itself. Teach by showing, learn by doing. So Squayohaga is the word for show me. And a lot of times it gets glossed as teach me, but it really in Cherokee it means show me. And so that says a lot about non-coercive, non-hierarchical, experiential ways of learning. Communalism and interdependence. So Anna Sixkiller offered this phrase, if we work together, we'll get somewhere. And then lastly, having a good time. The elders stressed it's important to laugh. It's important to be together and enjoy our time. So Ali Heliji Dasti, enjoyment. What we do, we have 3 group meetings per year. All of this, of course, pandemic aside, this is how the project is designed. Elder mentor projects, so students are paired off with an individual elder who mentors them on specific projects that they're interested in. That can include storytelling, it can include basket weaving, other activities. I'll highlight an example here in a minute. As I said, we have online meetings bi-weekly. During the summer, it's a little more spread out because the students were typically working in the heirloom garden and doing field outings with our tribal cultural biologists, working in the heirloom crop and medicine gardens during the summer and the growing season, but also working on stewarding and I guess you could say we've got a tract of land that I mentioned in my talk yesterday, and some of that has entailed putting a trail so that the elders can access it via a UTV, what Kawasaki mule type thing. So a vehicle that can get elders back into a spot of running water. And so the students and the staff for the Natural Resources Office have been working to establish that trail, and that terminus, at the terminus of that trail, a sitting area so that elders could enjoy that place, but also so that elders could teach students about the plants growing around it. And so I'm wrapping up. If you want to learn more about the project and keep up to date with what we're doing, there's the project blog website. And you can subscribe and get updates. Again, things have paused for now. But this is an image of the group at Crosland Smith's house. It's not everyone who was there. I goofed on it. I didn't get a picture, and so some people left. And we were able to get a picture with those who had not yet left. But that wasn't all the people who were there that day. This is in summer of 2018. It's the kickoff meeting, and Crosland wanted to perform a water treatment ceremony for the group to get us all started off on the right foot. So this is after that. You'll notice some of our hair is a little wet, so that's why. This is during that same kickoff meeting, the students working with Feather Smith. She's introducing them to the heirloom crop and medicine garden. This is an ethnobotany tour of our tribal tract of land that I'll show another picture of here in a minute, but led by Pat Gwynn, who's one of our skilled ethnobiologists, who's the director of environmental programs. So skimming through these, but unfortunately, but necessarily to have a discussion, this is Anna Sixkiller showing the students how to crack and hickory nuts. So sohi is what they're called. And eventually we made ganache, which is a fall and wintertime dish many of you may know of, because it's still practiced there in the homelands, but it's consisted of these nuts that have been pounded, formed into a ball. You can cook that, make that into kind of a soup-like beverage or meal. You can put hominy or rice in there and sweeten it up or make it salty. This is an example of some of the impromptu lessons that happen while we're out on the land. So this wasn't planned, but Gary Van here is teaching Summer Wilkie, Savannah Anderson, and Ashley Dreadfulwater about this root here. It's a medicinal plant that they were able to dig up and talk about there on site. Another image of Crosland talking about his book that had just been published. This is his first book, actually. He has another one out just recently that I've been working with him on as an editor, and just has a lot of amazing knowledge, wisdom, stories about his life as a healer, as a Katua traditionalist. We transplanted this plant. This is our junior member, Cherokee Davis, holding one of our 7 sacred plants here. We were, Pat Gwynn made a clipping. We were going to, or we took this clipping and transplanted it onto the tribal tract of land. This is Crosland Smith demonstrating or teaching about sacred symbology, Katua symbology, and John Ross teaching the students about the wild cherry tree, so Gitahya. This is one example of the students' elder mentor projects. And so Kylie Workman worked with Nancy Scott to develop a pamphlet that provides phrases and vocabulary for what you might want to say in the Cherokee language when you go out to the woods with a speaker. Pretty amazing example there. And this is a picture of that tract of land that I mentioned. It's a very, very beautiful place in Cherokee. The elders call it Nawatohiada Nowoti'i, the peaceful place of medicine. So we view this work in terms of Indigenous community-based resurgence, health and food sovereignty, and I'll end with this: the ability of Indigenous nations to foster the mental, physical, and spiritual health of their people is directly related to the ability to access and conserve plants on tribal lands, and as a result, sustain their knowledge of and relationship to those lands. So I'm way over time than what I imagined, but Wadon, thank you all. I look forward to a conversation here to follow.
Thank you so much, Clint. No, I think you could have gone on for a while longer, and we all would have loved to listen. I wish we had, 2 hours scheduled with you. Shki, thank you so much, Dr. Carroll, and to Trey. And also wanted to mention the NEH funding that say thank you to Kate Zebco for helping with funding, and to all of you for spending your sunny, beautiful Friday lunch hour with us. And we look forward to more conversations.
Wado, thank you, Corey. Thank you, Trey. Thank you, Kate. Go to Dago, honey. We'll see you all again soon.
Go to Dago Ha'i.